Thank you so much. Have a good one. So for those of you who have watched my videos before, you'll know that I don't like to be overly critical. And that's mostly because flying business class is a privilege, one that I don't like to take for granted. Well, with that said, this flight was absolutely terrible.
Okay, terrible might be an overstatement, but it wasn't great. Here's what happened.
Hi there, I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport right now, here to participate in an activity that is, what's up? Hi, I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport right now, here to participate in an activity that is quite popular here, especially in the winter, and that would be leaving for somewhere warmer. And specifically in my case, I'm going to Vegas, and I'm going the wrong way.
Tonight's flight will be a very straightforward 3.5-hour sprint across the continental United States into Las Vegas, coming to an even total of 1,300 miles.
Now, usually as these things go, whoever it is who's flying me out will buy me a direct, boring old flight from, let's say in this case, Toronto to Las Vegas. But in this instance, I had a little bit of time to look around the internet for the itinerary that I wanted, and this is the one that I found, and that is why we're doing today's flight.
The conjoined twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul are located about equidistance north of the shared airport, Minneapolis-St. Paul International. Apart from the unmistakably American system of highways and arterial roadways, the airport is also connected directly to downtown Minneapolis via the blue metro line and indirectly to downtown St. Paul via the green one. This dedicated tramway network will see an expansion in the next couple of years, but for now, they're just these two lines. The airport complex is divided into two terminal buildings, numbered 1 and 2. Terminal 2 is home to the more hipster of airlines, whereas Terminal 1 hosts the legacy carriers, so the latter is where we'll be headed tonight. This building has quite a weird layout, and it's not particularly well suited for easy connections, taking 25 minutes to walk from one end to the other. This is actually a secret government ploy to help alleviate the heart disease epidemic that is currently plaguing the country. There is also a tram on the north side, a worthy $36 million investment that cuts down the 25-minute commute on foot to a paltry 23 minutes. The interior of the building wouldn't be amiss inside a suburban shopping mall. Everything seems to suggest that it is exactly just that, from the abundance of retail and food outlets to the cheesy architecture. I kinda like it actually, it feels less stressful than the airport usually is. The illusion is, however, broken up by the banks of flight monitors found throughout the terminal in ubiquity. There are a few Delta Sky Clubs in this terminal building, but unfortunately, first-class domestic passengers such as myself in this case are not granted access. Apparently, you need a Platinum or higher Delta Sky Miles American Express card to gain entry. Okay, whatever, my flight's boarding soon anyway, so we won't dwell on this. After what I want to say was a short walk, but it definitely wasn't, I arrived at my gate, and it was right on time as boarding was just about to commence. Tonight's flight will be on this rather good-looking Airbus A350-900. Delta does not normally use these for domestic flights, but tonight is an exception as there is a higher passenger demand from the crowd going to CES. Business class, or what Delta brands as domestic first, boarded first through one bridge which led to the L2 door. And from there, a short distance from around the corner was my seat, 7A. Upon first glance, these suites are quite incredible. It definitely affords a lot of privacy with the high walls and offset seating arrangement. In my case, my seat was directly next to the window with the console closer to the aisle, whereas the suite behind me had the opposite configuration. On a side note, 8A, as you can see here, is missing a window. What a loser. Seats in the middle row offered a break in the partition, so you can talk to your spouse, and since rich people love to get divorced, it can also be closed. There was one business class cabin laid out in a 1-to-1 format for a total of 32 suites, all of which were occupied on this flight by gigantic tech nerds going to CES. Let's now do a comprehensive seat tour. And as always, let's start off with the legroom, of which there is quite a lot. I'm 5'11", or for the intellectuals out there, 181 centimeters, and I had plenty of space to stretch out. In front of you is a large touchscreen IFE display. It did not tilt, but the viewing angles were excellent. And next to that is a coat hook. Over here in the tiny corridor you use to access your suite is the magazine rack, and back here on the console are your seat controls. Now this is not a display, but rather a capacitive panel. The button clearly labeled table deploys the table. It pops out from here and extends out like this. It's quite large and very sturdy, but unlike the seats that are closer to the aisle, you are trapped in these window seats while the table is deployed. Down here are more lit up seat controls for easy access when you're in bed mode. Hidden underneath this flap is an oddly shaped mirror. Trust me, you're not fitting your entire face in this mirror. And the IFE remote. We'll have a closer look at this later on. The console features this very unique take on a shelf, and underneath here is a universal power outlet, a USB charging port, and your headphone jacks. And on the subject of headphones, there is a headphone hook, and Delta provides these noise-canceling over-ear headphones. We'll look at this later. On my flight, Delta also provided the smallest bottle of water known to man. There's probably more water on Mercury than there is in this bottle. While there's a lack of storage cubbies in this suite, that's more than made up for by the generous amount of table space. The seat itself is made from leather. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the material, no offense to cows or anything, I just don't find it entirely all that comfortable. With that said, the quality and stitching on these seats made it look very premium and of high quality. The embroidery for the Delta logo is especially well done. The subtle difference between the two shades of red is clearly represented. On the outboard side was this immovable small armrest, and my suite, unlike the one behind me, had 2 windows. Unlike British Airways, Delta thankfully did select the option for individual air nozzles. And on the overhead panel there is an LCD screen to display the no smoking and seatbelt signs. Subtle lighting touches can be found throughout the cabin and the suite. At the top of the forward partition, a bar of light runs the width of the suite. This wall fixture also added a splash of soft lighting to the side console. And the inside of this cubby is lit up to showcase the on-brand red lining. The intensity of each light can be adjusted, and overall, it's just really good use of light as a design element to contribute to the overall design language. There are no overhead luggage bins in the middle, instead the high ceilings are supposed to provide a sense of spaciousness. Airbus says that this design was inspired by the cavernous interiors of cathedrals, but I have yet to visit a cathedral that has ceilings made from plastic. On the subject of materials, the metal coating on my console has seen better days. Also, the carpet inside my suite was garnished with trash and other forms of detritus that the cleaning crew apparently neglected to clean up. Anyways, overall, Delta's cabin is very impressive. They definitely didn't hesitate on the opportunity to innovate when fitting out the A350. Not stopping there, the service on the ground was equally impressive. Instead of 2 or 3 choices of pre-departure drinks, the cabin crew offered me anything I wanted, within reason of course. So naturally, I went with a gin and water. This is water. Mom, if you're watching this, this is definitely water, not anything else. I mean, it even tasted like water, perhaps with a little bit of distillate in it. But yeah. At this point, after I was done stooping around the cabin and drinking my water, boarding was completed, the umbilical bridge was removed, and we began pushing back. The crew then asked us to fasten the shoulder strap to our seatbelt, and I was trying to get rid of the overly spicy taste of the bad water from my mouth. Okay, but on a serious note, that gin and tonic was terrible. I don't think it was the crew's fault, I think they just mixed up the gin and the aviation fuel. And while the crew were demonstrating the safety features of the aircraft, I couldn't help but notice that the passage from my seat to the aisle was in fact very narrow. If you are a larger or older or more pregnant individual, it may be prudent to avoid the odd number seats. But if you're all of those things, then sit wherever you like because clearly you don't give a fuck. After takeoff, the doors to our suites were unlocked, although my neighbor seemed to struggle with his. Not sure what happened there. Okay, this is getting a little painful to watch. Anyways, you just pull on this little latch here and the door closes with ease. Unlike BA suites, these walls are much higher, contributing to a really good sense of privacy. To open them, you simply pull on the handle. Oh my. Wow, he is still struggling. Oh man, that poor guy. After we ascended past the cloud layer, there wasn't much to see outside, so let's instead check out the in-flight entertainment system. First off, Delta provided these over-the-ear noise-canceling headphones. They did alright in terms of noise cancelling, but they weren't all that comfortable. And here we have the remote control. Like I said before, the IFE display is excellent, crisp, bright, and a good size. Only problem was the pictures for the media selection didn't load in, at least not on my system. This wasn't a big deal. I didn't even ask the flight attendants to restart the system, which would have probably fixed the issue. Regardless, the selection of both films and television programs was decent, but it was tailored heavily for an American audience with very little in the way of foreign productions, but nevertheless, it wasn't lacking. The route map was quite an anomaly, for it featured flight path 2D. You heard me right, 2D, not 3D. This means that while the maps are interactive, you are limited to a top-down view with no other camera angles. There were no external camera feeds either, nor any virtual cockpit views. A few minutes after takeoff, the cabin lighting was dimmed to this blue hue, politely interrupted with the soft tones from the lights inside my suite. The cabin could only be described as remarkably beautiful at this setting. I always thought LED lighting systems touted by airlines were a little overrated, but Delta in this case did a fantastic job putting on a very tasteful light show in the cabin. I could go on, but at this point we started experiencing a little bit of light turbulence. Did I say light turbulence? I meant heavy turbulence.
It was really bad. You may have felt us come down in a hurry to try to get out of those altitudes. Looks like the only cure is going to be to move to the west. The best word we have is about 20 more minutes with bumps like this, and then we should be in a better situation. Appreciate your patience with us.
I don't really mind turbulence, I actually welcome it as it helps me fall asleep, though it did mean that the cabin service was postponed, and having not been given any food on my earlier 2-hour flight, my gastrointestinal hormones were clearly upset with me. But I mean, on the bright side, I was on this beautiful A350 instead of the CRJ 900 behind us that was probably having a much rougher time with the bumps. Not having much else to do, I tried out the lie flat seat. It was very comfortable. Despite the armrest being stationary, there was quite a bit of space for my shoulders, and my legs and feet were free to do as they wished. Sleeping on my side was no issue in the legroom department, but the mattress did prove to be quite stiff. Watching TV from a reclined position is also surprisingly comfortable, with the display having great viewing angles. There was also Wi-Fi on this flight. As usual with GoGo in-flight, you can connect one device at a time and the speeds were good. About 90 minutes later, the seatbelt sign finally came off as we were passing over Denver, and I could finally manage a trip to the bathroom. Here we are in one of the 2 business class bathrooms. It's not very bright in here, but otherwise it was very roomy and well appointed. It was decently clean, and everything was where you would expect it to be, everything except for soap. There was no soap. I asked the flight attendant if she had any. She told me to come back later. Okay, whatever, I had hand sanitizer, so it's not all bad. There was a air nozzle, a baby change station, and a full-length mirror. When I got back to my seat, I was asked by a flight attendant as to what I wanted to drink. Having not exactly gotten the taste of that repugnant gin off my tongue yet, I asked for a cranberry juice. I then asked her what the meal service was going to be, to which she replied that there was no meal service on this flight. She then explained to me that flights departing after 8 p.m. don't get catering. Somewhat apologetically, she came back with a basket of snacks. I asked her if there was a buy on board menu, to which the answer was again, no, not on this flight. I mean, it could be worse. At least I got a bag of Ruffles and whatever this thing is. I tried to think of a reason as to why they wouldn't have any sort of food, but I couldn't fathom any. I checked their website and sure enough it said flights under 900 miles and after 8 p.m. don't get a dinner service, but I was hoping for at least a sandwich or some kind of wrap. Feeling a little defeated and wanting to eat my bag of chips, I decided to go give my hands a proper wash with some soap and water. And lo and behold, when I returned to the bathroom, they had some soap. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Oh, man. At this point, we were just a little over halfway to our destination. There was no running water in either of the business class bathrooms as the faucet sensors seemed to have malfunctioned. But that's okay because there's clearly no need to wash any hands, for there was no meal service, not even a sandwich or wrap to tide one over. Many of the other passengers were at this point visibly upset. Any initial excitement for the cabin had quickly evaporated. The rest of the flight passed by very slowly as I tried to enjoy a movie, then gave up and resorted to playing with the door as my neighbor continued to struggle with his. I was debating whether or not to be gentle with the criticism when the airplane made that decision for me by deciding to urinate on me. In reality, it was condensation coming from the air conditioning. While not unheard of, this usually only happens on older planes in humid environments. The flight attendant reassured me that this was perfectly normal and that there was no reason for her to do a maintenance write-up. Her solution to the continuous stream of water dripping on me was to hand me a single piece of paper towel. Wonderful. Thankfully, as we began our approach into Vegas, the AC stopped dripping on me and there was no more issues. At this point, I was just glad that we got to our destination and that I was still alive, which is probably the bare minimum set of expectations anyone could have for a flight. The cabin was amazing, but on this flight was kinda let down by the lack of service and everything else that went wrong.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Las Vegas. The local time observed is 10:06 p.m. Please remain seated with your seatbelts.
So for those of you who have watched my videos before, you'll know that I don't like to be overly critical. And that's mostly because flying business class is a privilege, one that I don't like to take for granted. Well, with that said, this flight was absolutely terrible. Mostly because I'm incredibly hungry right now. Hi, good evening. I'd like to place an order for in-room dining, please. I can kind of understand how there's not enough lounge space to go around for every domestic first class passenger, and I can kind of excuse them for not having soap in the bathroom and not having water in the bathroom, and then by the end of the flight not having soap nor water in the bathroom, and then the plane dripping water on me by the end of the flight. But beyond all that, it was really inexcusable for them not to have fed passengers. Especially passengers such as myself who spent about 9 hours with them today connecting through one of their major hubs and not being fed throughout that entire process. Now I know what some of you are going to say, that Delta and other flights such as from New York to LA do serve full meals, but considering that other airlines such as United, American, Alaska, JetBlue, and Air Canada all serve full meals on domestic or transcontinental flights longer than 2 hours, that doesn't leave Delta in a good spot. To that end, unless I find a really good deal, I don't think it'll be likely that you'll be seeing an international Delta review from me anytime soon. Okay, I've said everything I wanted to say, and it is way past my bedtime right now, even with the time zone change. So to that effect, until next time, safe travels.